Afternoon, everybody. This is the sound check for those joining. Welcome to the session. We're just admitting a lot of our people into the meeting. We will see you in a few seconds. Thank you, Anna Marie. So good afternoon, everybody. Good seeing everybody. Welcome to the Transport Forum event. Today is the 4th of August, 2025, and we're talking about the City of Johannesburg e-hailing management policy, and it's towards integration and equity. And we're proudly being hosted by City of Johannesburg and the Johannesburg Development Agency. Ladies and gents, it's great to have this digital platform where we can engage on. So it's important that we discuss our important logistics and whatever you can call it. So please keep yourselves on mute. There is a chat room the chat room. You're most welcome to use it to exchange contact details and obviously have some discussions with each other. But remember, everybody can see what you're talking about, and please keep the discussion related to the topic being discussed today in this event. You'll really appreciate that. Further, we have our MC today, Norman Muchialu, and she's going to MC the day today and also do the formal welcome. And I would really first, before I hand over to her, I would like to give some recognition to our sponsors of the Transport Forum, making this forum possible. So I'd just like to share quickly my screen with you guys. So there's the program of the day, which Naomi will introduce us to, and I'm still admitting a lot of people into the session. But as you might have noticed, the Transport Forum and all our events are complementary to the public. And we've been doing this successfully for more than 18 years. So obviously we have certain sponsors and associates with the Transport Forum making this all possible. And we're very thankful for all the support that we're receiving. So just quick recognition to all our sponsors. You can see there we've got in the top block there, we've got associations which are in a formal agreement with the Transport Forum. We've got the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, South African Express Parcel Association, the Road Freight Association, the South African Bus Operators Association, African Road Industry Association, the Safer Stops Association, Multimodal Inland Port Association, and International Women in Transport. So they are in formal agreement with Transport Forum. Obviously, there are many other associations involved, but these are in a formal agreement. The same with our media partners. Formally, Railways Africa magazine, the Freight News by Freight and Trading Weekly, Engineering News, and Focus on Transport and Logistics. Then we've got gold sponsors with the Transport Forum, and the gold sponsors are SmartTap. It's by TicketPro Smart Tap. We've got Control Fleet. We've got Global Trade Solutions, Zutari, JC Auditors, Unitrans, University of Johannesburg, TicketPro Travel, Birthday Cargo, Kuba, Freeway, Data Noble, Standard Bank, EasyClear, Internet of Things Integration, and In Control. And the platinum sponsor of the Transport Forum, as you can see in the top of the screen, is CTRAC, a telematics, advanced telematics organization. They've also been involved with the Transport Forum since inception. The same with University of Johannesburg. And the other gold sponsors actually been involved with us many, many years. So we're very privileged in having all of them on board. But so let's give a big hand to all the sponsors and making this possible for more than 18 years. And the Transport Forum actually became one of the most powerful platforms of communication in the transport sector in South Africa over these 18 years. So taking us back to our program, and I'm going to remove the program because I want to introduce you to our MC for today, Naomi Mutialu. Thank you, Naomi. So please, you can take us further.
Thank you very much, Harry. And I'd like to warmly welcome everyone and also add my thanks to you for joining today's virtual meeting. It is truly a privilege to be in the company of some of South Africa's most respected transport specialists, planners, and industry experts across both the public and private sectors. And we understand there are many competing demands in your time this afternoon, so we deeply appreciate your commitment to being here. My name is Naomi Mutialu from NMA Effective Social Strategists. We're part of the Civil Concepts team appointed by the Johannesburg Development Agency on behalf of the City of Johannesburg's Transport Department. And our team has been tasked with developing an e-hailing management policy for the city. So today's meeting is one of a series of stakeholder engagements aimed at formally introducing the project, unpacking the current policy and legislative environment, reviewing the status quo, and discussing future planning for the e-hailing industry. Most importantly, we are here to listen to your views, your insights, recommendations around current e-hailing services, facilities, and the broader urban mobility environment. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today, and that's Nobuntu Duze from the City of Johannesburg Transport Department and Yaku Kriya from the Civil Concepts team. I'm sure you'd like to unmute and say hello to the participants.
Thank you, Naya. Thank you to everyone that's joined the call. We hope it's a fruitful session with the colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you, Nobuntu. And Yaku?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yaku Kruger from Civil Concepts here, as Nomi said, and we're looking forward to engaging with you today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So Harry, if we could have the program up on the screen, please. Thank you. Excellent. So in terms of the agenda, the crux of today's agenda then is a project background and overview from the City of Johannesburg, covering both the e-hailing management policy and the parking management policy. And then for the first session, which will last approximately 1.5 hours, we'll focus on the e-hailing management policy, beginning with a policy progress and literature review by Civil Concepts. We'll then like to open the floor for any clarity-seeking questions, followed by a collaborative discussion on key topics and focus areas prompted by both our technical and facilitation team. And then if we can move that agenda or program, thank you. And then for the next session, lasting about 25 minutes, we'll include a presentation on the parking management policy, and then finally conclude with formal closing remarks then by Nobuntu Duze. If that agenda is in order, we would be happy to get started. I'll take the agenda then as confirmed. And before we go into the presentations, I'd like to take you through a quick overview of the stakeholder engagement strategy then for the e-hailing management policy. Just to say that our process is structured and inclusive, with engagement built into every phase of the project. This ensures that the consultation then is aligned with key project milestones and fully integrated into the study methodology. The process will unfold in 2 main phases. Phase 1 is a status quo assessment of e-hailing in the City of Johannesburg, and phase 2 is the development of the e-hailing policy itself. And to support a truly inclusive policymaking process, we've planned approximately 36 targeted consultations with stakeholders across government, that's local, provincial, and national, including the state-owned entities and the municipal-owned entities, e-hailing operators, drivers and customers, public transport providers, business and residents associations. And we're using a mix of public participation platforms, including surveys, workshops, and digital engagement channels. And also a collaborative, feedback-driven policy development process where your input will help shape the final policy recommendations. So on that note, if everyone is comfortable, we can proceed with our presentations, and we look forward to an engaging and productive session with all of you. Thank you again for your time. And I'll pass over then to Nobuntu. Thank you.
Am I audible, Nomi?
Yes, you are. And the slides are visible as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again for the opportunity. So my job here is one of the easier one, just to give a project overview into the project that the city has embarked on as it relates to the management of e-hailing in our city. So my presentation outline will briefly touch on the background to the project, the CoJ current policy framework that underpins this work, some of the work we've done as a city from a meter taxi industry perspective in trying to understand operations, the e-hailing management development project that we'll be discussing today, what are our objectives in developing the policy and the phases of implementation on the policy. So I don't think I need to tell everyone on the room that advances in technology has in the main led to a reduction in how relevant the traditional meter taxi industry is. So e-hailing through the use of technologies has obviously changed the way we travel. It's mostly safe, it's mostly convenient as a travel option. It has also added and improved access to mobility for seniors and some people with disabilities through the utilization of the various devices to access the various platforms that exist. We also note and appreciate some of the work that colleagues from City of Cape Town have done in relation to the legislative framework that they have as it relates to the impoundment of vehicles and operating licenses, and also note with keen interest on the work that they have done as it relates to the implementation of permitted zones of operation in their city, and also that being utilized as a basis for impoundment of e-hailing vehicles. Having noted the positive impacts of the e-hailing sector and the disruption is obviously caused insofar as the meter taxi industry in particular is concerned, some of the negative impacts that have materialized also in our city and then throughout the country have been conflicts that we've seen at times with loss of life, conflicts that relate to meter taxi industry conflicts with minibus taxi industry, as it also relates to the perception of competition for passengers. Also the issue of the fact that we do not currently have a framework that informs us on how we dedicate, if at all, spaces for holding, especially within the public environment, where you would see a number of our nodes of economic activity having a lot of congestion due to e-hailing vehicles being all over the show and leading to congestion and thereby minimizing accesses to those centers of economic activity in our city. And because of the conflicts that exists with the minibus taxis and meter taxi industry, although it may have reduced somewhat at present, but I think it's still passengers are currently experiencing some inconvenience in the fact that at some points they are not allowed to be dropped off and picked off in certain areas, coupled with law enforcement that at times is perhaps not supportive of ensuring passenger and driver safety. But having said all of that, it's obviously a market that we cannot ignore as a city, because it's estimated that its market share will largely increase to the tune of just under 18% by 2027. So we do need to make sure, whilst we recognize the positive impacts it has had on the transport system as a whole, we need to tie down and manage better the negative impacts that we are seeing. So from a city strategic perspective, the development of this policy aligns with key outcomes for our growth and development strategy for 2040, which is our aspirational strategy for the city we would like to see by 2040. Three of the outcomes, outcome number 1, 2, and 3, The first one being the improvement of the quality of life of our citizens, and also making sure that we provide a resilient and livable urban environment that is underpinned by infrastructure that supports low carbon economy. You would also note that the city has also got a recently approved climate action plan, which is basically a plan also, it has a number of interventions that the transport sector as a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions need to implement to try and align more to this outcome. Outcome number 3 is also obviously very important in making sure that the city is an inclusive city, and that the jobs are, and that the economy is job intensive, is resilient, and is also competitive. And it includes everyone so that no one is left behind from participating in the economy of our city. So this strategic integrated transport plan framework is a precursor to what is currently being developed, which would be the comprehensive integrated transport plan for our city. What is important coming out from the strategies and thrusts from this transport plan framework is that the city needs to ensure that we manage congestion, travel demand, and parking. We need to improve transport safety, and we also need to transform the transport sector through the encouragement of new, efficient, and profitable transport enterprises and green jobs. So as I previously mentioned, we previously did some meter taxi audits in 2016 for those CBD areas that has been noted. What was important for that is that we identified areas of ranking, areas where ranking is taking place, which ranks actually were accommodating meter taxis, and also the companies operating from those particular spaces. Said info assisted in the main in addressing some of the gaps that existed post the completion of the transport information register that we had. So I think in the main, we want the policy to provide a framework for us for how we manage e-hailing in the city. The project itself and the consulting team will touch a bit more on the phases, but it's roughly 2 phases of implementation, which is the first one is a data collection and literature review exercise that needs to be undertaken. And the data collection has identified key areas that have been in the main maybe problematic and different in character. And then the intention is that the status quo assessment will then inform the development of the policy itself. And there will definitely then be consultation through the development of the policy and the results of the status quo prior to us as a city taking through the draft policy through to the various council processes in order to get it approved as a city policy. So I think with that, I'll hand over to the consulting team. Thank you. Oh, is it me again?
Thank you very much, Nobuntu. We'll pass over then to Yaku, who will take us through the policy progress update. Thank you, Yaku.
Thank you, Nomi. Is my screen visible, the presentation?
Yeah, okay, no, it's not.
Not as yet. Whilst we're giving Jaco a few minutes to get his presentation up, he has it on now. Just to note that a copy of the presentation will be uploaded onto the Transport Forum website. Over to you, Jaco. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nomi. Okay, so just looking at what we'll be talking about today. So we'll be looking at the project deliverables, our study area, just looking at the policy progress that we have made thus far. We'll look at the literature review and also look at some survey feedback that we've had. We'll also, the stakeholder engagement, Nomi has covered. So just looking at the policy, the project deliverables, we basically have a 12-month window that's been divided into 2 phases. In the first phase, we are busy with data collection as well as a status quo assessment. During this phase, we're also busy with the literature review, and then this will all feed into the second phase when we will be drafting the draft e-hailing policy. And that's also why we're engaging with this forum today, so that we can take the feedback that we get here today and include that in when we compile the draft e-hailing policy. Just looking at our study areas, basically there were 8 study areas that we're focusing on. So there are 4 malls and then 4 CBD areas. However, the policy will be rolled out into the whole CoJ, but in order to gather data, etc., we're focusing on these 8 areas. So just briefly before we start, what is transport policy? According to the Geography of Transport Systems, published by Rodrigue in 2024, transport policy is a framework of principles and propositions that aim to achieve the sustainability of transport systems. It enables decisions to be made on how resources will be allocated and how transportation activities are managed and regulated. These policies are also developed in response to the existence of a perceived problem as well as opportunities. And they're also used to manage competition in the market, which prevents the inherent monopolistic tendencies of the sector. And I think if we all know the history of the e-hailing, this all sounds very familiar as to why we are busy with these policies. Just looking at the policy objectives, Nubuntu touched on the thrusts of the CoJ, the objectives. So we are obviously aligning with those objectives and thrusts. So firstly is to ensure the sustainable accommodation of e-hailing services. This aligns with thrust number 2, 3, and 8. Then it's also to support economic growth, which aligns with CoJ thrust number 4. And then it's also to manage congestion, travel demand, and parking, which aligns with CoJ thrust number 5. To improve e-hailing safety, which aligns with CoJ thrust number 6. And then also to encourage new, efficient, and profitable transport enterprises, which aligns with thrust number 7. Looking at our literature review, so how will this policy align with the city strategies? So we first did a review of existing strategies and policy documents, projects of the city, as well as bylaws to ensure that the policy aligns with local, international, and international best practices. We also went through the CoJ policies to identify any gaps that needs to be filled by this policy that we are busy developing. Looking at the international policies and publications, the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy published in 2019 a document called Ride Fair, a policy framework for managing transport network companies. In there, they also identified challenges which many cities throughout the world went through. So these transport network companies or e-hailing companies are linked to increased congestion in major cities. What contributes to this is the deadhead or 0 passenger miles, which these empty vehicles sometimes have to travel or passenger without passengers. Then there's also debates over whether these TNCs are drawing passengers away from transit, cycling, and walking, or are they complementing those modes? There's also it's also unclear whether many of these business models of these companies are sustainable. There's also lack of transparency about profitability, and the operations of this mode also requires public rights of way and additional curb space or the use of curb space that would have been used by other modes if it wasn't there. And then also TNC regulations and pricing in particular has the potential to push people to private single occupancy vehicles if the fees are made unaffordable. However, there's also opportunities for this mode. Effective regulations could maximize benefits such as contributing to people's ability to live car-free, as well as to connect people to economic opportunities. It also minimizes costs such as increased congestion or attracting riders from public transit. So these are all opportunities for the development of policies for this mode. And then also it could aid in the design and cultivation of more livable cities with affordable, accessible, safe and pollution-free transportation. Then looking at recommendations from this report, it says that TNC regulations should address 4 critical regulatory elements, which includes pricing, metrics, data, and regional coordination. Under pricing is to incentivize shared, shorter, less frequent trips. Under metrics, to establish baselines to better understand TNC impacts. Under data, use operator data for policy enforcement and valuation. And under regional coordination, to facilitate connectivity through multi-jurisdictional regulation. In Europe, the Center on Regulation in Europe also published a document in 2021, Transport on Demand, how to regulate ride-hailing in the EU. They recommended under regulations that the legal situation of ride-hailing platforms should be clarified. That we've actually done in South Africa as the NLTTAA, the Amendment Act, actually categorized ride-hailing as a public transport mode and not private transport. Then under regulations also said meter taxis should operate under existing regulations with regulated prices. So they in essence remain regulated as they used to be in the past in Europe. And that e-hailing should operate under regulations with unregulated pricing. They further recommended under basic rules and conditions for the delivery of permits that driver status and capacities, they included basic rules for driver conditions and delivery permits. These include the driver status and capacities, age, experience, criminal record, etc. Vehicle characteristics be included, environmental and safety standards, and the minimum maximum driving obligations during flat peak hours to secure service around the clock and to avoid overcongestion during peak hours. They also recommended that numerical quotas should be exempt and temporary and should be based on demand, congestion, and environmental impact. And the data sharing is essential. They recommended tachographs for the monitoring of driving hours, etc. And then they also recommended consumer complaints and dispute resolution mechanisms should be generalized, mainstreamed, and be made credible. Then looking at some of the case studies that we reviewed, obviously there's an extensive range, but some of the more notable ones. In Mexico City, interestingly, transport network companies are considered as private transport. And they rely on self-enforcing mechanisms, such as in-app ratings, to notify customers of the standard of services. In terms of the policy review in this case study, they noted under data requirements that no explicit data sharing requirements are present in Mexico City. Also, under integration with other transport modes, these transport network companies are classified as private services. So their view is that there's no need to integrate with, and under legislation, there's also no need to integrate with public transport modes. And in terms of policy enforcement, there's no penalties or mechanisms for enforcement. So very loose in Mexico City. Moving on to Sao Paulo, app-based mobility services. can only be provided by companies and vehicles that are registered in the city. They levy a road user charge per kilometer traveled. And then research found that transport network companies were not siphoning, interestingly, market from other taxi or meter taxi services in that city. And that it attracted new clients who previously walked, cycled, or took transit rather than from other taxi modes. Just looking at a review of the policies in Sao Paulo under data requirements, the transport network companies there must submit data reports as a requirement. Under payment requirements, the transport network companies are free to set fares so long as they fall under the maximum values established by the municipality. In terms of government revenue, there's a vehicle kilometer charged on TNC trips. And then under policy enforcement, compliance is monitored by the municipal and state agents, and fines are issued for non-compliance. So a little bit more regulated here than in Mexico City. Then looking at London and New York, I'm just briefly going to touch on some of these items for sake of time. You can see under the regulatory framework, both in London and New York, they focus on transparency of the fares that these companies charge. And then in terms of fair market competition and regulation, they are also focused on leveling the playing fields in both these cities. Data sharing, again, also a requirement in both cities. And the safety and regulation, stringent driver vetting and driver screening in both cities. The requirements for emergency response integration in both cities. Then looking at environmental and sustainability goals, both looking at net zero targets for emissions, and then also provide incentives, tax breaks to companies who do adhere to the requirements that are set. And then also they promote ride pooling in both cities. And then in terms of congestion management, in London they've got zonal pricing, while in New York they cap the number of licenses. They also have congestion pricing in New York, and in London they promote off-peak travel incentives to reduce rush hour demand. Just some examples of surcharges that are levied in some of these cities. And also on the right-hand side column, you can see what these surcharges are used for. So some make use of a percentage of the trip cost. Others have a fixed amount. But these funds are all funneled to the Taxi Mobility and Pedestrian Fund. And some of it get funneled to for example, benefit accessibility for persons, disabled persons. So just in short, a lot of opportunities to use those funds that serve as a surcharge to benefit the wider community in the city. In terms of regulatory reforms, there was a case study published in the TD Encyclopedia in 2015, which noted that the findings were that regulation should support and be supported by transport planning and funding practices. They also found that previous overregulation of the taxi industry in the United States has led to high barriers to entry, monopolies, and limited competition. And this, in the end, resulted in high long-distance fares, long waits in poorer communities, poor service delivery, and limited access for disabled to these services. And then it also notes that regulatory reform and deregulation is the trend in the United States, UK, Sweden, and New Zealand. So again, just noting there that overregulation has a detrimental effect on this industry, and to find that balance is essential. Looking at some of the existing City of Johannesburg policies and noting some of the gaps. So just Under the parking management strategy, this document identifies high demand parking areas, guides pricing controls, e-hailing, increases curbside congestion. And then the potential gaps of this document, it does not address the short-term stops, pick-up and drop-off zones, or dynamic curbside use by e-hailing. In the CoJ Growth and Development Strategy of 2040 document, it's an aspirational framework for the sustainable, equitable transport and development. This document lacks explicit guidance on regulation on integration of digital mobility platforms. In the Climate Action Plan, this document lacks or has no mechanism to align the e-hailing operations with decarbonisation goals. The Strategic Integrated Public Transport Network document of 2019, the gaps noted here, there's no provision for integrating e-hailing into public transport fare systems or first last mile solutions. In the Spatial Development Framework, there's limited integration of flexible transport modes and no specific e-hailing provisions. The Land Use Management Scheme, there's limited reference there to e-hailing, lacks pick-up and drop-off zone guidelines. Parking management strategy is outdated, does not consider e-hailing's impact on parking curb space. Spatial Development Framework 2016 and 2021-2022 lacks clear policies for e-hailing regulation and infrastructure despite recognizing mobility nodes. The nodal review has insufficient guidance on e-hailing integration in node planning and modal interchanges. The transport master plans that was recently completed for the inner city and Roodepoort mainly focuses on traditional transport, and e-hailing is seen as a marginal service or challenge. And then the CoJ draft transport bylaw, this will aid in the drafting of e-hailing management policy that is informed by the existing public transport regulations. So yes, a mouthful there, but we're looking at all these policy gaps and hoping to fill these gaps when we develop the policy for the e-hailing management. Looking at the National Land Transport Act, Act 5 of 2009, this act allows for making regulations relating to the requirements of fare systems and fare structures, as well also the types of vehicles that may or may not be used for public transport services and standards or specifications for vehicles subject to the National Transport Act, Road Traffic Act, rather. Special requirements for drivers of vehicles used for public transport, including but not limited to the testing for knowledge of the area in question, and then also regulations with regards to coordination between municipalities to ensure the effective and efficient execution of land transport in the province and to promote provincial legislation. Also provides for the regulation of road-based public transport and sets the requirements for operating licenses. Quite a few sections in that act actually talk to how operating licenses are issued and when they expire, in essence, etc. Then the Amendment Act came along in Act number 23 in 2023. And this addresses the requirements for e-hailing services and operating license applications. Key provisions of the Amendment Act is emphasis on importance of non-motorized transport and accessible transport. It includes a definition for electronic hailing or e-hailing services and recognize these services as part of the public transport system. And then it also inserts section 66A in Act number 5 of 2009 for electronic hailing services. And the proposed e-hailing management policy will align with the provisions of this Act to ensure consistency with national regulations. Just how far we've come with the data collection. So the data collection is there to gather data for the understanding of the operations in the city. Obviously, we want to align whatever we propose with what is happening on the ground, although it will not dictate what is in the policy, but the policy does need to take note of it and propose regulations that does not necessarily throw things upside down when it gets implemented. So the key goals here are to identify e-hailing apps and operational details, to map operational hotspots in the city, analyze demand and patterns by area, and to obtain trip data on passenger, vehicle numbers, model splits, and origin destination trends. So here we had to collaborate with service providers. Due to the nature of this mode, many of the vehicles are unmarked. It's not always easy to identify these vehicles. So we are very reliant on the existing service providers to share their data with us, although it's not a legal requirement yet. So here we requested data on operations, parking, trends, trips, origin destinations, and routes, and then also data on drivers and customers, customer experiences, complaints, etc. And we also did on-site analysis where we did driver interviews, looked at passenger activity and parking utilization in those 8 areas that I showed in the beginning, the 4 malls and the 4 CBDs. And then also we looked at public transport integration, if any, or how they're interacting with modes. Some of the malls, where are the existing minibus taxi ranks in relation to where the e-hailing guys are informally ranking at the moment. Our land use colleagues at Plan Consult, also part of our consortium, they are doing a town planning assessment where they're looking at existing and planned land use, zoning, ownership and servitudes. So looking at high demand zones in business districts, transport hubs and shopping centers. They're looking at regulatory compliance, pick-up and drop-off zoning regulations. They're reviewing public and informal training spaces to identify e-hailing activity zones and informal trading hotspots with potential to be formalized in future. They're also doing a land audit report, looking at ownership verification and land assembly issues. Then we're also assisted by urban economists, also part of our consortium. They're looking at the economic data. So this economic data feeds into also getting collected through a collaboration and engagement with e-hailing service providers. This will feed into the economic impact assessment. And just in terms of the success we've had so far with collaborating with the transport network companies, so we've had some initial meetings with them. They've given us the initial feedback, some concerns with regards to data sharing, etc. Of course. So they noted the limitations of data that can be provided, and so supplementary data collection efforts are underway. We're doing our own site observations just to see whether we can verify whatever data they're giving us in the end. And then we've also updated our formal request for data just to align more with the concerns of data sensitivity, etc. Some of the on-site surveys that were conducted, some common themes that we identified was crime and safety issues, very prevalent, issues with parking, drop-offs and pickups, and then some pricing issues. So just looking at crime and safety, some of the driver feedback that we've got was that drivers are getting scammed by passengers, request a ride with insufficient cash for trips. Both drivers are more prone to hijacking. So some modes more, some companies more prone to hijacking than other with extra safety features. The branding of the cars, especially in townships, they feel it's risky, can lead to hijacking or assault. And then there's extortion noted by competing modes. Some of the other crime and safety aspects that they noted is that female drivers feel unsafe to work in the early morning hours and late at night. There's also extortion by passengers, fake requests, again, for food. And then they feel that the local police are not assisting them when they file reports. And then the routes are not shown until they pick up the person, and that leads to them driving to dangerous places after they've committed to a ride. And just lastly, in terms of parking, pickup and drop-off, noted e-hailing drivers park on street, road reserves, and in open spaces, and free parking spaces in shopping centers. Preference is generally to park away from taxi ranks due to the conflict with these ranks. And then they also again note that there's extortion by the minibus taxi associations during drop-offs near taxi rank hotspots, and obviously why they are avoiding these taxi ranks. So with that said, we are going to move into some general questions if there are any, and then we've got some topics for discussion listed, but I think if anybody has any direct questions for Nobuntu or myself, you are welcome to let us know.
Thank you very much, Yaku. So as Yaku indicated, you're welcome to raise your hands if you have any general questions on the presentation for Yaku or Nobuntu, and we'll be happy to receive those. Yes, so I see Susan Holtz, your hand is up. We'll take your hand, and then I'll also note the hand of Ronnie Govender, but we'll start with Susan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not a question, but just a comment. I want to commend and acknowledge that's included in the presentation has been the first, last mile and non-motorized services, and that there isn't anything included in the integrated public transport network plan around that. But thank you for acknowledging it. It helps us to actually make progress in the industry. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you. I'm not sure if Nobuntu would like to say anything about that.
Yeah, I think non-motorized transport is something that you may feel that it's not given the attention that it deserves, but we do have frameworks within the city that supports that. But I think sometimes the level is in the standards that inform the implementation. But from a citywide planning, we were, as a city, just busy with a proposal to do a citywide walking and cycling network. So we are busy with quite a number of projects that seeks to promote non-motorized transport in the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Nobuntu. Ronnie, your hand was up before I take Iviwe's hand. Ronnie, did you still have a comment or a question?
Hi, good afternoon, Ari and the team. I think this is more for Jaco. I didn't see anything, or I probably must have missed out that did you do a risk analysis from a customer point of view on your proposal? And secondly, is there any standardization for these vehicles that the e-hailing owner stroke driver, as similar to the minibus taxis? Is there anything standardized, for instance, in comparing the sedans 1300, 1600, and what are the safety measures incorporated into the vehicle? Yeah, I think this is just the two, although I had a third one, but I lost track of the message. I'll revert back to you. Thank you very much, Naomi.
Thank you, Ronnie. So those two questions in terms of the risk analysis for customers and the standardization in terms of the vehicles and the specific safety measures. Jaco, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Just to answer your question, no, we did not do a risk analysis. As part of our as part of the terms of reference, we're not required to do a risk analysis. However, once the policy has been drafted, we'll obviously look at any risks, and also the whole public participation process is to also get feedback from industry, and get feedback from clusters, etc., to make sure that the needs of everybody is addressed as far as possible, as far as we can. Again, it's a balancing act. But no, in terms of the risk analysis, we have not conducted that. In terms of the standardized vehicles, so the National Land Transport Act does make provision for the standard for vehicle characteristics and minimum standards to be put in place. However, that is something that we are also looking at, whether it's something that needs to be addressed on a policy level. Currently, as far as I know, there aren't really any minimum requirements for vehicles that have been published that we've come across. So you're welcome to alert us to any that you're aware of. Also looking at what is out there, the drivers are basically using in any vehicle that is registerable, I guess, or that is sold commercially as a potential vehicle, or as a e-hailing vehicle. So but in terms of the minimum standards, that is something that is allowed for under the National Act, and we will definitely at a policy level see whether we need to, on a municipal level, note something for that. And Ubuntu, I don't know if you want to add something there.
Ubuntu?
I think suffice to say that the consultation that we had this morning with Maponya Mall representatives and Jabulani Mall, the issue of safety is something that came up quite strongly. So as much as maybe the terms of reference imagined were not as overtly tying the issue of safety, I think it's embedded in the policy that will need to be developed. But I think there's obviously a responsibility not only on the e-hailing sector to ensure safety, but also some responsibility from the users as well, because some of the activities and some of the bargaining that happens with these so-called pirate Ubers is also, it happens because passengers may not necessarily be very much well inclined in relation to how they should use the service to also ensure their own safety. So we as a city will be working together quite closely with the companies as well, and also doing a lot of consultation with just the general public in relation to issues of safety as they affect this particular sector. But definitely the policy must make proposals that are implementable to ensure safety of the users of the sector. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ubuntu. So I see there's quite a few hands up. And just to note, you are welcome, if you'd like to do so, to introduce yourself to the room, your name, surname, and organization. So we'll go over to Iviwe, and I'll also pick up comments in the chat as we go along. So let's start then with Iviwe.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Iviwe Mhlaba here from Eagle Eye Defense. We focus on biometric vehicle security. So we look at multi-factor authentication for vehicles. I have both a comment and a bit of a question. One, is there a safety framework as it speaks to the safety of the Uber drivers or e-hailers in general? And two, is there an association that governs the Gauteng province? So part of the work that we've been doing is engaging different associations that govern the e-hailing service providers, mainly in most of the other provinces, Eastern Cape and KZN, Western Cape, and recently Northwest as well. And one of the things that we've found is there is a lack around a safety policy that speaks to the drivers before we even get to the end user or the consumer, but that just speaks to the driver safety. I know when we had our very first meeting with the chair in Eastern Cape, one of the biggest things and one of the front pages of the Daily Dispatch of that day was the level of hijackings and robberies that were happening there. And one of the things that we've implemented is our system as part of the the requirements, so to speak, in quotation marks, for a large part of the drivers. And that's immediately had us look at with the MEC of Transport just last month. We had a look at the stats, and that's gone down drastically. So my question is both a question and a comment. Are there safety frameworks and policies that govern e-hailers outside of just the basics of you need a basic telematics unit? What outside of that is being provided, if anything is being provided? And then two, is there any association that governs the Gauteng province? Because I know all of the other provinces, or most of the other provinces, have an association which they conform to, but with Gauteng, we found that a bit of a tricky one.
Thank you very much. So we'll pass over to Nobuntu. Nobuntu, if you could please come in, and then Yaku could also pick up on some of those safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I'm not aware of a safety framework in particular for the e-hailing sector, other than the legal framework that currently exists. I think, as noted, the issue of safety, I think the other speaker also noted that, and it's something that we'll have to, in partnership and collaborating with stakeholders, have to look at quite deeply in. But obviously, from a city perspective, the consulting team would have to assist us from where our responsibility as a city starts and ends. Because obviously we don't operate these vehicles, but we obviously can set a framework that enables the safety. I'm not aware of an association that overall governs e-hailing in Gauteng. But it's also something that actually came up in our previous engagements, where even mall owners were saying that they're always talking to different people. So I think the issue of the e-hailing sector being better organized is something that this policy would also have to touch on, and also to enable the safety, because when things happen, people at times don't know who to run to, who to consult with, as opposed, for instance, the minibus taxi industry is very organized from an association perspective. If something happens to you on a train, we, even from ourselves as a city, we know the associations, we know who to contact, and in that manner, the collaboration is improved because they are better structured. So the e-hailing sector also needs to fall in line in that way. That's our view.
Thank you very much. Yaku, I'm not sure, and just to add to what Nobuntu has said, we are aware of an association, but I think your question around an association governing, Nobuntu has answered that question. Yaku, is there anything more you'd like to add in terms of the safety framework?
I think some of the safety aspects are covered by the public transport bylaw of the city. So the bylaw does speak to the information of a driver that must be displayed in the vehicle. Some rules of public transport facilities worth noting is that unless you're a law enforcer, you may not carry a gun, for example. And then again, carrying a dangerous weapon. And then also some of the obligations of passengers, that passengers may not hang onto the exterior of a public transport vehicle, etc. So some of these safety aspects are covered in the city's public bylaw, but that's obviously something that we are looking at and will expand on, and if necessary include in the policy, and that could also serve as a basis for the public transport bylaw of the city to be updated again in future and include these safety requirements.
Thank you, Yaku and Nobuntu. So I'm just going to take a question in the chat. Sibon Giseni, I do note your hand, and Podu. JC Greyling in the chat asks if there's any investigation into the different levels of testing or certification of the condition and or roadworthiness of the vehicles used in the e-hailing services. Yaku or Nubuntu, you're welcome to come in. Yaku, would you like to start off?
Yeah. So again, the National Transport Act does allow for standards to be set for these vehicles. Obviously, these vehicles have to meet the minimum requirements for road-based transport in terms of roadworthiness. So I'm not sure if there's any special requirements that is needed for these vehicles. I mean, roadworthiness is roadworthiness. I don't think a vehicle that carries public transport passengers, there could be a requirement that they get inspected more regularly. Yes, I'm not aware of any of such regulations, and again, that's something that we could look into, the intervals for inspections. But in terms of general roadworthiness, I guess a vehicle is roadworthy or it's not roadworthy, and I think general vehicles on the road doesn't have to get inspected unless it gets sold, etc. So for this type of modes, I would definitely think that it could be a requirement that they be inspected more regularly on an annual basis, for example.
Thank you. Nubuntu, anything to add?
It is our view that as e-hailing provides a service to the public, and as us as a sitting wanting to ensure the safety of the driver, the safety of the users, there has to be some sort of regime that looks at these issues of roadworthiness at a much more regular basis, because we have seen a slide in the roadworthiness of the vehicles being utilized. The standard is not the same as it was when the services were being introduced. So the policy would have to reflect on what it is that we practically can then include in the policy to enable such, obviously within the framework of the national legislation.
Thank you, Nubuntu. So we'll take Sibon Giseni's hand. You're also welcome to introduce yourself, unmute. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Monseni from South African Meter Taxi and E-Hailing Association. I'm not sure. I think I should think that you are at a stage where you're still doing some research in as far as this policy is concerned. I just want to understand how is this aligned with the regulations, and if you have seen the draft regulations that are actually signed and be implemented. Why I'm asking what I'm asking, because of there are a couple of questions that I'm not satisfied in your answering, especially you talking about the roadworthiness and the standardization of the vehicle. We had many concerns about the Bajaj, the yellow Bajaj from India, of which that car, it does not suit the standard of ferrying passengers, and especially if they have to drive that car on the highway. Sorry, there was a call coming.
Yeah, if you could, we lost you there, Sibon Giseni. Thank you.
Yes. I was just saying that still we are at the early age of your research in as far as this policy is concerned. And answering your question, there are organizations or associations that are representing the operators in Gauteng. GS is one of them, and ourselves as SAMTIA, South African Meter Taxi and e-hailing. You can get hold of us we got a lot of information about what is happening on the road and what is happening on the ground. Because of focusing only on e-hailing apps companies, it's not going to give you the feeling of the drivers on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll just take that last point around the organizations. Yes, we are aware of the two organizations that you have mentioned, and we do have contact details for those organizations. But I think the question was a slightly different question. Let's go to the question around how is this aligned to the draft regulations, and how early in terms of the stage of development of the policy are we in, because there are certain concerns around the gaps in the answers. So Ubuntu, would you like to take the question on how is this aligned to the draft regulations? And then I'll also bring Yaku in.
Thank you, Nomi. I think my opening remarks stated issues around congestion in our city caused by how operating licenses are issued or not issued. They also spoke to us wanting to support the sector. So having said that as a precursor, the intention of the city is not obviously to supersede national regulations. However, national regulations do have an impact on how the city functions. And the city, through the Municipal Systems Act, has got a right to make policy and got a right to make bylaws to govern itself. So the national regulations obviously affect all of us, and we have to align with all of them. But where we feel as a city that there are gaps in that national legislation that would that we feel could make us support the sector and manage our city better, we will do so. And this is the reason that we are doing so through the development of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yaku?
Yeah, what I can just add on to what Ubuntu said is yes, obviously we are aligning with the national regulations, not to reinvent the wheel, but just to supplement from a municipal level what we can. I mean, obviously the municipality cannot include regulations now that will be in contrast with the national regulations, or for example, the concern that was noted about a vehicle, a specific vehicle make. Look, if as long as it's roadworthy, I guess you will need specialist studies to confirm that vehicle is not suitable for passenger or transporting passengers. Bar that, it will just be deemed opinion. So if there is any specialist studies out there, but again, that will feed into the national level, because you cannot prohibit a vehicle to operate on a municipal level. We part of a Gauteng province. This will have to then roll out to other municipalities. They will have to get on the same page. So just in that, keeping that in mind, that this is for the city of Johannesburg, and whatever we do here eventually will have to integrate with other municipalities, and also it will have to line up with what has been implemented on a national level.
Thank you, Yaku. Padu, thank you for your patience. We'll take your hand. You're welcome to unmute and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Malisela Bodu, and I'm a BCom in Transport and Logistics Management student at the University of Johannesburg. What I actually have is a question of interest, and my question is, how do we ensure that there's integration between the e-hailing services and the minibus services to reduce the current conflict that we usually see in the city of Johannesburg? Because according to my understanding, both the e-hailing services and the minibus taxi services serve people of different income brackets. Thank you.
Thank you, Podu, for that question. Yes, it is on the top of everyone's mind. So I'll pass over first again to Nubuntu. Thank you, Nubuntu.
I think we integrate them by when we do our various plans to really try to dig deep into the mode e-hailing in the planning framework that I've been involved with in particular. Whilst there has been an appreciation of meter taxis, e-hailing, it hasn't been overtly really, considered in terms of what, if any, is the city's responsibility for the provision of infrastructure for this sector, for instance. So how we can incorporate it is in when we do plans for the different nodal areas, we have to have an understanding of the demand for the sector, and then coupled with what is going to come from this policy, then guide how city planners accommodate the sector in the various nodes. Because most of the time, what we are finding is that it's congestion everywhere. Because when e-hailing came about, it was always envisioned that it's a pick-up, drop-off type of service. It doesn't need areas for holding. Lo and behold, down the years, they are creating, obviously, becoming quite a nuisance. Sidewalks space is being taken over by them and the informal trading sector. So we are trying with this policy to try and formulate some framework and guidance to city planners on how they can meaningfully accommodate the sector. But there's also the issues of conflict. I think conflict as well are about stakeholder consultation. What we've just witnessed in our earlier discussions with other stakeholders was that there can be a light at the end of the tunnel in such a way that there can be cooperation and not competition between the various modes through an understanding of the different sectors that they serve. But we have to start the conversation and plan together with those particular modes. Thanks.
Thank you, Nubuntu. Jaco, did you want to add anything before I take the comments in the chat?
So just very briefly, again, to add on to what Nubuntu has said, look, there's obviously a demand for this service. It came into a space where there's a need for more flexibility that some other modes cannot necessarily always provide. So I think the long and the short is just that we're trying to accommodate all modes, get a place in the sun for everyone. And through as I mentioned in one of my earlier slides, through this policy, it creates an opportunity to serve as this, to make a place for everyone, and to guide how these modes will integrate, and hopefully that will negate the need for any conflict between these modes.
Thank you. So there's a question from N. van Dijk, a member of the Gauteng legislature, in the chat. And she'd like us to expand further on holding spaces. It's a big issue in Sandton, noting the Gautrain, where JMPD is needed daily to address traffic and at times issues of violence, talking to local leaders, city, and they are unable to assist. We'll pass this one over to Jaco first. Thank you, Jaco.
Yeah, look, we've had some meeting with the clusters as well. Again, this is a theme that pops up constantly. This is part of the. I think Nubuntu mentioned it in her opening, and I might have reiterated in the beginning of my presentation. But this is part of the reason why we're here and developing a policy. Is this the conflict? This has created conflict between some of the competing modes. And these guys are unfortunately, because no space has been provided for them, are ranking informally. This is also creating problems at, for example, what we've heard on Friday is creating problems at, for example, malls, where it's difficult for the security guys to distinguish between guys that are scoping out a mall and trying to attempt a robbery versus who's just who's just standing there waiting for the next trip. So it's definitely a need. And from a spatial point of view, that is one of the big goals of this policy, is to address this and to see how where this mode will be accommodated within the city. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything to add, Ubuntu?
Yeah, I think through the policy development process, we obviously at an early stage now with the gathering of data, literature review, speaking to yourselves for ideas, comments at this early stage. I mean, we're nowhere near a draft policy, as it were. But I think one thing we would have to, in trying to respond to the issue of expanding further on holding spaces, the responsibility of the companies insofar as the people who are assigned to their platform having space to hold is something that has to be put to these service providers, because it cannot only just be, a consideration of the utilization of the public space. The private space off-site type of arrangements need to be explored. How we provide parking off-street, how that parking that is provided off-street accommodates e-hailing, accommodates meter taxis, need to be further explored also as part of this policy, so that it will guide us in terms of not leaving this sector behind and improving the functioning of our nodes, especially from a congestion perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ubuntu, and thank you for that question. So I'm picking up a question in the chat. It says, the question is, who did you engage with from the e-hailing sector, given that they do not have a recognized representative structure? Were the app platform companies, example Uber, Bolt themselves, not also part of the problem, since they are the ones who determine the fares? So I'll let Yaku handle that question. And if there's anything to add, I'm sure Ubuntu or myself will be happy to do so. So Yaku, over to you.
Yeah, so obviously we reached out to we first did a analysis of who are the role players in the market. We are dealing on a level where we even looking at the e-hailing scooters, the delivery services for the 6060s, Mr. D, etc. From a passenger point of view, we looked at obviously the major role players are the first guys that we engaged with, but we also looked at some of the newcomers to the market, some of the smaller companies. So we did engage with these companies on an individual level. First sent out emails, then tried to contact them. We've had some meetings with these that we could reach. We did have meetings with the bigger role players, the Ubers and the Bolts. But it was on an individual level. It wasn't through a association or yeah, it was on an individual level.
Thank you. And to add that, in fact, there were also consultations jointly with the various e-hailing management companies. But I think the question was very much around the data. There are a few other questions in the chat, and I'm going to just group two of the questions together. JC Hreiling asked a question around the vehicle vetting and has provided a further comment. We found that different e-hailing companies use different levels of vetting of vehicle conditions before they are granted access to the apps in use. Some do their own assessments and electronically send in photos, and some have vehicles physically assessed before being allowed to operate on the apps. This should be better regulated in policy to ensure passenger safety and sustainability of the services. And I'm sure Yaku has come across that as well. And I'll pass this over to Yaku, but also a follow-up point from Ronnie is that he says, Yaku, I just want to clear my point. My reference was not to the make of the vehicles. This will be against the grain of fairness. I was referring to engine capacity. One cannot allow a small sedan to take 5 passengers. This is a safety problem. So Yaku, if you could come in, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just want to reiterate that we must just remember where we are. We're in a municipal space, City of Johannesburg. We've got City of Ekurhuleni just around the corner. We've got the City of Tshwane just to the north. So we cannot now go and write policies on vehicles, for example, and say you cannot use this type of vehicle because these permits are issued on a provincial level. So if a guy gets a permit and he stays in Tshwane, now Tshwane has got no regulation of the size, minimum engine size that can be used, etc. So this is more something that if it gets dealt with, could be might be at a provincial level, but it actually needs to be dealt with on a national level. So we can obviously at the end of this make recommendations to national to higher levels on a national level. But in terms of dealing with those things on a municipal level, I think it could be tricky because of where we are situated. If we're more isolated, maybe. But again, we might be overstepping our mandate. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next one I'm going to give over to Nobuntu. And I think that's the point of this e-hailing management policy. This is from Ronnie. The note that the taxi industry is semi-regulated whilst there's no regulation for the e-hailing sector. Lunga's response is read the National Taxi Lekgotla document outlines how National is trying to integrate the minibus taxi and e-hailing. All right, so Nobuntu, if you'd like to come in on that as well, and then we'll go over to the focused questions for discussion and collaboration. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna be repeating myself. I think I think it's sufficient to say that we note the comments, and I think the intended outcome of the policy has also been communicated. So we will go as a team and review what it is that we're trying to achieve, and also review comments that have been shared through a myriad of stakeholders, the stakeholders that are on the call today, the others we've consulted, and the others we still need to consult in coming up with a draft policy. And then said policy will then be significantly consulted upon through a month-long exercise where we have gotten it wrong, or where we have not, where we've gotten it wrong, and where people have want to add a little bit more to better manage the e-hailing space within the city of Johannesburg. They'll also still have further opportunities to do so. But this exercise today actually was to share what it is that we are doing, and if there's anything else for us to consider as we move forward, that we may or may not be privy to get that information from yourselves. Thanks, Norm.
Thank you, Nobuntu. So I'll ask Yaku then to lead us in terms, or rather to put up the slides in terms of the focused questions, if you have any. Thank you. All right. So Yaku, if you'd like to take us through these questions, maybe go through all of them. And then we're happy to take one at a time and get responses. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'll run through all the questions, all the topics for discussion, and then we can take them as they come. So, firstly, just with regards to designated parking or ranking, location versus competing modes, accessibility, preferred locations. I think we did have a comment earlier on with regards to ranking, and then in terms of congestion, travel demand management. Any comments or experiences with limiting the vehicles per zone, or surcharges, as I've shown earlier on, what these surcharges can be applied for. In terms of data sharing, this is definitely a requirement overseas. Many cities like Mexico City, which things are a little bit more loose, but in Europe and America, definitely data sharing a requirement. the installation of tachographs or app-based tracking. Just any thoughts on that? And then in terms of regional coordination, we've had some discussions now on some requirements for vehicles, etc. And I did mention that we are sitting in Gauteng province. We need to coordinate regionally as well. Anything that we do here, we obviously the city wants to make their own rules, but also it needs to be able to integrate with other municipalities around it. And then maybe lastly, just on environmental impact, any thoughts on emission reductions, phasing in? I know there are people here from the meter taxi industries, or maybe other taxi associations as well. Just any thoughts on emission reductions? We heard on Friday that many taxis in the city of Johannesburg are already using or have converted some of their vehicles to gas, which costs about 7 rand a litre. I'm not sure how accurate that is. That's just second-hand information that we got. But just any thoughts on that and the phasing in of electric vehicles? The city does, in 2021, there was a strategy for emission reductions that was published. And many overseas countries have a maximum age that vehicles can have before they have to be replaced. And what any thoughts on that? Is it necessary to put a 10-year limit on vehicle age, 7-year limit, and for phasing in of electric vehicles or other technologies that are more environmentally friendly?
Thank you, Jaco. So ideally, we'd like to start off right at the beginning in terms of the designated parking ranking, the competing modes, accessibility, preferred locations. You're welcome to raise your hands. Sibon Giseni, you're welcome to come in again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to add on what Jaco has alluded on, we do have some conversions to gas. A couple of our vehicles are on gas. Is for cost saving and also contributing in terms of the pollution, and also in terms of the infrastructure, and as far as the EVs are concerned, that has been a problem. We did launch about 3 years ago. We launched the vehicle with Aura, the Haval, but the thing is, we have a problem of charging stations. So the infrastructure is still not available for the kind of service that we are doing, because it takes some time to charge the vehicle, and also the charging points are quite scattered. So it's something to look at in as far as Sisnobutu has indicated in terms of the parking bays or the holding bays. So the holding bays, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that the e-hailing services, they did need holding bays. You know why? Because of people from time to time, they need to go to the toilet. So now if they park on a road or they park on a site or they park under the trees, what the sanitization is being compromised. Where do they go to the toilet? Where do they go to the toilet and relieve themselves? So now we will need that. It mustn't be converted to a ranking space. It should be a holding bay, but it must have some kind of facilities in terms of people relieving themselves. Thank you. And also charging while they're waiting for pickups, and then they're charging. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sibon Giseni. Yes, so those are two pertinent points around the holding areas needed, and with sanitation facilities and charging points, but just from a city-wide perspective in terms of the infrastructure that is needed for these EVs in the way of charging stations. Nobuntu, would you like to come in?
Are you talking about the infrastructure for charging? No, sorry, I was busy
Yes.
writing what you were saying.
Yes, the infrastructure for charging, correct, at a citywide perspective.
I'm actually not aware, Nomi, of like guideline documents that speaks to the location, preferred location of charging stations. What we were doing as the department, we were actually working on supporting a pilot that was going to be done by, I think, some NGO that looked at, but they were looking at the last mile delivery service and having charging stations in one of our business nodes. And they've written quite a number of technical notes for our consideration. But I think it's something that the city really needs to also look at in much more detail, together with our colleagues from environmental infrastructure. Because on one hand, we are saying from a climate perspective, we want to promote and enable this the electric vehicles. But I think from an infrastructure perspective, how do we do that? Where do we do it? We need to work a little bit more with our counterparts in enabling that and making sure that gets realized. I mean, I do get from time to time requests for charging stations, etc. It becomes quite a difficult thing to respond to, because the framework for guiding external stakeholders currently is not clear, and that perhaps that's something we need to, as a city, have a position on, so that we can further guide external stakeholders.
Thank you, Nubuntu. Yaku, are there any points that were made that you'd like to pick up on?
Yeah, again, I can just add that, look, demand normally drives supply. So there is an opportunity, especially when taxi ranks are a requirement for shopping centers with new shopping centers with a size of over 5,000 square meters. So there is opportunity there to, and taxi associations normally get engaged with when these facilities are developed. So there is opportunity there to talk to the guys that are implementing these facilities to add one or two of these charging stations, and so it could slowly get rolled out. But again, I think the more these vehicles become prominent on the streets and the roads, the more people will. There's obviously also a financial benefit for people reselling this electricity or putting up these charging stations. So again, the more that there's a demand for this, I guess the supply will eventually keep up. But in the beginning, it is a bit tricky, I guess, if you're coming with the electric vehicle now to the market. But yeah, I think it's something that can get phased in, and especially with new developments. And then just with regards to the facilities, yes, obviously it's going to be a challenge to with the current competition between modes. You're probably going to have separate facilities for e-hailing. You can't mix them with other taxis at this stage. But there is definitely a need. Most of the drivers that we've spoken to, they make use of petrol stations, etc., when they need to take a break. But it is a challenge. We did note Friday some complaints of people in a cluster that these things are happening, where people do relieve themselves in open spaces. So that's definitely, and part of this is to provide these facilities for the e-hailing, so that they do have facilities where they can do these things.
Thank you, Yaku. Yes, so are there any other hands? I think Yaku, one of the things you really wanted to find out about was the congestion and the traffic management, in the sense of limiting vehicles per zone, and the need or the possibility of surcharges being implemented. Do you want to talk a little bit about that in a bit more detail, so we can maybe prompt some discussion on that?
Yes, as far as I understood, I mean, this was a forum for academics and transportation professionals. So if there is anybody with some experience or that has maybe done some research on this or has been involved with studies, similar studies, they could maybe expand on what typical surcharges could work better in a South African situation or City of Johannesburg situation, and then how successful congestion charging have been, if any, if they have been involved in projects like that, or are aware of any other in other cities.
Sure. Any contributions to make to provide Yaku with some important information around that? I mean, Yaku, in terms of the other clusters that we've engaged with, they have had specific feedback around the surcharges. Do you want to just say a little bit about what they have said? And then I'll take Lunga's hand, maybe in a nutshell.
Yeah, obviously, I think some of the comments that we had is what guarantee is there going to be that these surcharges will be applied with appropriately, that they will be used to benefit people with disabilities, for example. And that is always a concern. I think if there are clear, what we did mention at that stage is if there are clear goals that from the beginning, from the get-go of what these funds will be used for, and on an annual basis, the amount of income that has been generated from it and what it will be applied for gets noted, then there's more transparency, and that's one way to make sure that the benefits of these charges are realized. Some of the comments that we did get as well is that as the margins are already fairly low, that this charge will just get transferred to the users. I guess that's part of travel demand management. If in certain peak hours you don't want people to travel as much, you do charge them. If they do want to travel, you get a financial benefit from that can be applied somewhere to benefit the city, to benefit other maybe disabled commuters, for example. So and I think that is the initial feedback that we got, and also our initial thinking around that.
Thank you. So I'd like to take Lunga's hand, but just to note that JC Freeling in the chat says she's happy to engage with Yaku further offline. And Yaku, can you please pick up that email address for JC Freeling in the chat? Lunga, you had your hand up. I see it's down now. Would you still like to contribute to the discussion before I take Nina?
Thank you so much. I think also Yaku just answered my question, because it was based on the share charges, to say one of the things that were highlighted when we're discussing the policy is that the e-hailing has increased mobility for senior citizens and people with disabilities. So surcharges, obviously the end user will have to pay for them, but that's taking into consideration to say, like, the group of people that were mentioned here, I don't think they'll be able to afford extra charges. And also those app e-hailing companies, they already do have share charges based on how bad the traffic is or how many people are requesting at that time. Will that be will the cost of that be added on top of the share charges that is charged by the e-hailing company? Thank you.
Thank you, Lunga. Those are great points. Yaku, I'll pass straight over to you.
Yeah, no, those surcharges that they are leveling are for their own benefit, for their own financial benefit. That's a benefit that they get because of demand. So that's what we're talking about here is something that the city the city benefits from, and that can get funneled to benefit the communities or certain specific target groups. That would be, just to answer that question, that will be on top of that. In terms of the benefit of this technology is that if somebody does have a disability, it's easy for them to in some way register on the app that they do have a disability, for example, and then they can be then they don't have to pay that surcharge, for example. So that's the benefit of having these technologies, that you can build those type of functionalities into it.
Thank you, Yaku. Nina, your hand is up. I know you said your question was answered, but I do believe you have another question. Please go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. You just mentioned now about kind of cross-subsidizing for disabled users through an app. Do you mean that there would be a new city-led e-hailing app that all e-hailing platforms need to sign on to so that there can be this cross-subsidization, or is this a policy that you would like to have all e-hailing platforms apply? And how would you sort of regulate and verify who is legitimately disabled, or then just qualifying what means disability is like a whole new area to jump into? Sorry to now as I'm speaking, I'm kind of coming up with more questions, but so maybe let's start with the first one.
Those are great questions. Yes, Yaku. So how would this be practically implemented? Are you suggesting a new city-led app, or would individual e-hailing companies implement it? And if so, how would this
work? I think Ubuntu jumped in there. No, definitely not. No, Ubuntu, don't worry. I got it wasn't up for consideration. No. Obviously, look, this will have to be dealt with on a e-hailing company basis. Look, there's obviously you get people that grab a blue sticker and put it in their window and at the casino.
We've lost you there, Yaku.
No, it seems that his connection failed. There he's back. Yes. It seems he's back now.
Are you
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I could say something about connection unstable. Apologies for that. Now, what I was just saying is, you do get people that take that blue sticker with the wheelchair and put it in their window and go park in the front of the casino or the mall. But I mean, I guess that's what you want to prevent. That obviously will have to be dealt with on an individual app base. That how it won't be abused. I guess that's something that we will have to look into. I mean, we will have to rely on the e-hailing companies regulating that. Whether we want to go as far as to get a city database for those people, that's something that the city then has to start managing. I don't know if they have the appetite for that. I guess the first step would be to rely on e-hailing companies to look at and verifying these documents as a support service for people with accessibility needs, I guess. Just to be fair, that they don't get punished or penalized is the word I'm looking for. That they don't get penalized for being disabled, and that they don't be included in these surcharges. So that initially would be the idea.
Thank you very much, Jaco. And at this stage, it's a proposal amongst many other proposals. And I guess the point would be, this is very interesting and very constructive debate around. And Nina, I think you've raised some really thought-provoking questions around how such a thing could be implemented practically. So there were some questions in the chat relating more to the question on the environmental impacts. So I'm just going to pull it out quickly. So there was a question from Madeleine Engelbrecht. Instead of congestion charging, rather go with low emission zones, since they also provide environmental benefits. Many European cities only allow electric e-hailing stroke meter taxis in the CBDs. So I'll pass over then to Jaco for that.
Yes, excellent. No, thank you for that comment. That will obviously drive the implementation of these new technologies. I know we've been slow to adopt it in South Africa, and this putting policies like that into place would obviously then serve the environmental benefits, and it will also serve to phase in this technologies rather than having to rely, as you say, on congestion charging. To monitor these vehicles, where they get allowed to drive, and that is where these the data sharing and the I don't know if there's other technologies than tachographs available or app-based monitoring to see where these vehicles are driving. But yeah, that definitely would be, instead of congestion charging, would be a way to go forward, is to phase out old gasoline-based vehicles and allow for electric vehicles then to only be allowed in, for example, the center of Sandton during certain times of the day, or you know.
Thank you, Jaco. So
yeah, let me just come in there, Nomi. So EISD did, supported by C40, did a feasibility study on the implementation of these low emission zones. So whilst the outcome from the feasibility studies was positive, in that obviously that's the direction that we need to take, I think the city also is mindful of the economic impact of electric vehicles and the phasing out of the normal vehicles. So from a city standpoint, we would obviously have a process which would entail how we move into that particular sphere. It's not something that, you know, that can be done yesterday. Someone has already alluded to the fact that even from a infrastructure charging perspective, we're not where we would want to be because of the take-up of these vehicles. So it's obviously a balancing act with the provision of infrastructure, economic imperatives, environmental imperatives. All of that need to be seriously considered as we move towards establishing these low emission zones, however feasible they've been deemed to be. Thanks.
Thank you, Nubuntu. Would you like to move on then, Jaco, to the tachygraphs and the data sharing going forward? How maybe if you can give a little bit more information about that, and we can stimulate some debate or discussion on it. Thank you.
Yes. Just I think it was the one of these reference studies in Europe or America that I think it was the Europe one that noted that is the way that they monitor compliance. So these technologies can serve various purposes to monitor compliance with policy, as well as then for other users when you want to go to limit the amount of vehicles per zone, etc. So yeah, it was just I know there are companies in South Africa with excellent track records that have expanded to overseas markets that typically would have this technologies easily available, your tracking type of companies. But if anybody else has any experience or whether app-based monitoring works better than tachygraphs, or yeah, just maybe some feedback on that. Again, yeah, just looking for some experience.
Thank you, Jaco. Anyone with any contributions on any experience or any insights on that particular issue? Okay, there's a comment from Gerard, I think, Jaco, which you can pick up in the chat. Just a correction. All right. Any other comments or contributions? What did the e-hailing operators, for example, say about it? I know they were quite specific. That was something that they indicated they would take under consideration based on, do you want to talk a little bit about that without, giving away any confidential information?
Yeah, look, obviously this will implementing technology like this will have there is a monthly cost connected to these, but I mean, you can connect it, you can link it to, if you want the operating license, that is something that you will have to have. I'm sure it won't cost more than 100 Rand a month to have this installed in a vehicle. If you take that, some of these guys that rent the vehicles pay up to 2,900 Rand a week to rent it from guys with operating licenses. Then I think it's a small amount versus the benefit that the city and the province could get out of it. So, but again, yeah, these companies did say that's something they would take under consideration. In many countries, it gets written into regulations. So, I guess whether they want to take it under consideration is not really a question. It's what the city needs, being able to enable them to monitor your compliance with policies. There's no use for us to write these policies, but it's very difficult to monitor and implement them in the end. So data sharing is essential, and that's a common theme that keeps on popping up in international literature, is the need for data sharing. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there's no particular feedback on that issue, we can go into the regional coordination. I think we've had a lot of input from different cluster groups in terms of the need for integration across the different levels of government. And here, Jaco's also talking to integration with other municipalities. Yeah, Jaco, do you want to lead any particular discussion? This would be the last point for discussion. So I'm not sure if you'd like to say anything, and we can open up then to hear if anyone has anything to say.
Yeah, I think we've touched enough on the environmental components. Just with regards to regional coordination, obviously, as I mentioned many times, that the city of Johannesburg is right in the middle here of many other municipalities. Obviously the policy will be drafted to the requirements of the city. But also during the drafting phase, we want to be mindful of any considerations that we should have for integrating with other municipalities. And I think that is the purpose of this, just to see if there's any considerations that anybody wants to allude us to that we need to be mindful of at this stage.
Thank you, Jaco. Let's see if anyone has any contributions on that. And I'm sure, Nobuntu, this is a matter that you've obviously thought about quite a lot as well. Is there anything you'd like to add? Not at this point. All right. All right, well, if there's no particular feedback on this, I'll just check the chat as well, just to see if there are any comments in the chat. No, I don't see any. So let's see if there are any other general comments that anyone would like to make. If there are none, then let's pass over to the next presentation, which deals with the parking management policy, and that is a short presentation. I just want to note, for the purposes of the e-hailing management policy, the next meeting with the Transport Forum is, and here obviously we'll speak to, Harry is a key and vital player to this, is proposed for Thursday, the 6th of November, from 9 to 12, but I might be a bit preemptive on that. But in any case, you can loosely make a note of that if you're interested in the policy, which I'm sure many of you are. And at that point, the team will come forward with proposals, concepts, ideas. So it will be a far more collaborative in the sense that we'd like to really hear from you, and to prompt a lot of discussion around some of the proposals that the team will have around what needs to go into this management policy and what it would look like. If we've exhausted then the questions and presentations around the e-hailing management policy, I'd like to thank you for being part of that, and for all your insights and contributions. And I'll ask Nobuntu then to take us through item 7, which is the parking management policy. Thank you, Nobuntu.
Can see it now. Is it on slide mode?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
it is, and I can hear you as well. Thank you.
Right, super. So thank you so much. So this project is hijacking Nomi's e-hailing, but thank you anyway for affording us the time. This is just to give participants an overview of a project that we've recently just done. So I'm not gonna really go into a lot of the policy framework, because the policy framework in essence is similar to the policy framework that was discussed under the e-hailing policy. So I think sufficient to say it's an information session of what we've just completed, which was the draft status quo assessment report, which has just recently been finalized in June of this year. So this is to just share that information with yourselves, to let you know what our thinking is from a parking management perspective, and as we move towards the development of this policy. Just gonna skip this. Okay, so as far as we understand, from a parking management perspective, is the number of strategies that can be utilized by a local municipality to increase how effectively we use existing parking supply and thereby reduce traffic congestion in areas. So we have desired as a city to implement parking management in order to improve mobility and reduce traffic congestion, and thereby making a number of areas more livable and boosting economic growth. So it may be because everyone is maybe aware of the nodal review policy, which was developed and is an approved CoJ policy, which was based on a modeling exercise that measures the urban potential based on how connective and how accessible the city is. But in the main, we are in alignment with this citywide policy, which seeks to promote and enable walkability, public transit, as opposed to merely just focusing on access and mobility through the utilization of the private vehicle. So through working with colleagues from development planning, we have identified a total of 20 study areas that fall within those categories listed of the nodal review policy. Previous work we've done as a means to try and manage on-street parking in itself. We've done some studies on 25 nodes in the city. We've previously implemented a parking management system, which was overseen by our colleagues from Johannesburg Metropolis Department. We've worked with the GIZ in terms of formulating a framework document for parking strategies that are applicable for the city. And we've also developed quite a number of parking management plans, albeit not yet implementable, for Braamfontein, which is the worst of Bertha Street, the Oval area, Newtown, Maboneng, and Berea. So we appointed a consortium of traffic engineers, urban planners, designers, and economists, and community participation specialists to assess the status of parking on street and off street, the land use and economic activity in a number of areas that I will just briefly show you. So the status quo that we appointed them for will then be utilized to develop the parking management policy, similar to how we are going about developing the e-hailing, where we have to first collect data and understand the sector prior to the development of the policy. So the parking management policy will give us guidance on how best to manage on-street and off-street parking in different nodes of the city to ensure that we meet our strategic goals of managing and reducing congestion by 2040. So the areas, study areas that we focused on to inform the policy development is the inner city core, the metropolitan nodes. So for instance, we have Sandton, Midrand, regional nodes. Jabulani was assessed, and Jabulani is still being assessed even as part of this policy. General urban zone, looking at areas like Parktown, Cresta, and Mayfair. Suburban zone, for instance, looking at the areas like Greenside, in industrial zones like Stratham Park, Northgate, etc. And the reason that we went about this way is because previously the city did not have a framework of being very nuanced in how it manages parking, taking into consideration the different categories of areas. And so we want, with the new policy that we'll be developing, to have a more nuanced policy whose strategies will be also linked to the different areas that we hope to manage. So this is just a spread of the areas within the boundary of the city of Johannesburg. So some of the key findings, and I'm going to try and go through these quite quickly because of the time, is that obviously parking is a key land use and traffic contributor. There's a mismatch between short stay and long stay parking provision. It has always been our view that long stay parking should be off street and short stay parking to be accommodated on street, but that's not necessarily what is happening in some of the nodes that we've assessed. The informal areas are relying excessively on on-street parking because of insufficient infrastructure, and that results in areas where there's a lot of congestion and just urban decay as well. So without proper control and an effective management entity that would oversee a parking policy, the disorder that we see will persist. I think what is important to basically note from some of the common themes that have come from the study area is that where you have high densities with limited road space, we create congestion with parking often unmanaged and informal. That's something that we want to zoom into with the policy. But areas like Sandton, obviously there's I don't think there's a shortage for parking off street in those areas. And there's obviously gaps with regards to the infrastructure that has been provided in some of the areas when you look, if you were to compare them with the parking that's provided. Okay, so we've done a consultative exercise through the status quo assessment, where we ask the affected stakeholders to identify current parking challenges, the usage patterns, and some of the priorities of the communities. We wanted to do this to foster collaboration and to build consensus among a diverse range of stakeholder groups. And then we wanted to utilize a data-driven approach to inform the decision-making. The key decision here is the form in which the parking management policy will take. So these are just some of the stakeholder engagement processes we've had in terms of the numbers of meetings, the manner of the meetings, some physical and virtual, and the data collection through surveys, questionnaires, and open discussions during meetings that we've had. So from a policy and zoning perspective, most of the areas in relation to the parking that's provided are largely governed by the city's land use scheme and the nodal review policy, and both of these do support transit-oriented development. There's also quite a number of strategic area frameworks which provide guidance for the redevelopment of high densities with improved transport integration in the city. So we've also reflected on the impact of reduction in parking rates. So we are mindful that for us moving forward, when we start the process of developing the policy, we need to be mindful of parking reductions should only be encouraged in specific situations. For instance, where parking can be shared, where land uses have got different peak demands, and also where it can be shown that the peak parking demand of a development can be accommodated with a reduction in the parking rate. So what we'll be doing currently is to reflect on the status quo assessment that has recently been concluded, and then we will work then to start also still within this financial year the process then of developing this parking management policy for the city. So I think that's try to be as quickly fast as possible. So but that's basically another project that we hope once we have started through its development, we'll have an opportunity to come through this platform and do a presentation and get your valuable insights. So over to you, Nomi.
Thank you very much, Nubuntu. I think we'll open up then for any clarity-seeking questions on the presentation. Nikki, you're welcome to unmute, introduce yourself, and go ahead with your question or comment. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the presentation, Lobotho. It's Nikki Sassman. I'm with the City of Cape Town, and trying our best to do what you're also doing in terms of parking management in the city. So our parking policy was approved in 2020, and it was an update of an older policy. And I was just wanting to ask, when we did our parking policy, the way it changed from the previous policy was we saw managing parking as a travel demand management tool. So instead of catering for the peak parking demand, actually seeing how we could use parking to manage people's travel choices. And our argument was that if parking is part of the cost of your whole trip, obviously it's free. If it's free, then it's not going to discourage you from using your private car. And so that and what we'd read from the international literature is that parkers generally don't pay the full economic and even fiscal, financial cost of parking, let alone the social cost of parking, because that's taking up valuable land use space, especially in CBDs. If it's a social cost, it means everybody's carrying it, and the majority of people are not able to afford to drive a car, and so they're the ones who are subsidizing. So essentially, you've got the poor subsidizing the rich. That was the premise. And so we've been doing what we can to see what tools we can use to reduce parking provision rather than to accommodate peak and to internalize the cost of parking onto the driver themselves. So I wanted to know what you thought of that approach. We're also looking at on-street and off-street parking together, because obviously they work hand in hand. And yes, also wanting to keep the long-term parking off the street. And we've had an interesting conversation, and I wondered if you, in your engagements, we haven't been as engaging as you have, and I think we need to learn from that. When we did speak to a developer in the CBD or an asset manager in the CBD, they were saying that at the moment, since COVID, their parking utilization by their tenants is about 30%. And so they're interested in making that parking available to the public. So that really reduces the need for the municipality to provide any on-street parking or parking areas in those areas where the private sector already has. So we've calculated through our valuations role where they do, we can extract how many parking bays are in buildings in the CBD. We've calculated we've got 47,000 parking bays privately provided in the CBD. So, really, is there any, and then we've only got 2,000 on-street parking bays. So we're really seeing, there's an oversupply, and yet every new development wants to provide excessive amounts of parking. We have our zoning scheme doesn't require any, but they do provide a lot. So yes, we are still stuck on minimum zoning and minimum parking requirements like you are. But when do we move to maximum parking requirements? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Nobuntu, there were quite a few questions there.
Yeah, some questions and some comments as well. So thank you so much, Nikki. I think we need to collaborate even more. So yes, we agree that parking, its management is a TDM tool. So we have a TDM management program that we also completed in June of this year, which actually is looking at parking management as a strategy of TDM. So I think we are aligning where that's concerned, but there always seems to be our CBD also in certain areas. There's different zones where obviously you don't have to provide parking, but I think there is there's always a retort that our public transport system in the main is not where it's supposed to be for you to enable you to aggressively, reduce the parking that is provided. So it still remains a challenge. There are areas, for instance, that are more accessible or rather can be utilized for, and I do know there's been a pushback to work from home, but there are areas when you look at the nature of land use that can lend itself, for instance, to utilizing work from home as a strategy for travel demand management. But I think we just need to obviously keep on going and also improve, the public transport offering, because unfortunately, what I've found is that it's always the retort, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not so rightfully so, that even city practitioners are always comfortable to grant minimum parkings, because I think there is a hesitancy to reduce parking. What if the parking gets needed, etc. But I think the strategy of sharing parking, maybe we need to, as a city, explore that a little bit more, and devise ways in which our city practitioners from development planning become comfortable with those types of strategies, because ultimately they are the ones granting, especially in particular, the use of the quantum of off-street parking. And I think we haven't yet, unfortunately, got them on board with regards to some of the parking management strategy. So it's still a work in progress with us. I think we sort of have a sense of where we should be moving, but I think at a practical level, it's still becoming very challenging to find that parking management strategy, and by extension, travel demand management measures, find expression within the full scheme of development planning documents. And then I think that's a city internal discussion that we need to consistently work on in order to move forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Nubuntu. So Madeline Engelbrecht in the chat says that she agrees with Nikki. Parking reduction and increase in the cost of parking is the most effective TDM tool. And then she also asks if there's any plans to introduce maximum ratios. Yes, thank you, Nubuntu.
I'm not sure what is development planning's feeling on that, but my view when we were consulting with them on this work, and also on the travel demand management program, they are very hesitant to make significant changes on the parking. And I think a significant amount of work from a public transport perspective will need to happen to convince them otherwise. But that is something, I think as a department, we had a number of years back made submissions to them for the implementation of parking maximums versus minimums. But I think the take-up has not been where we would want it from a transport perspective.
Thank you. And then she also posts a link in the chat with the note that transport policies that address the attractiveness gap between the car and sustainable modes are crucial. And she has posted a link to OECD publication, Transforming Catalonia's Mobility System for Net Zero. So if you could get that link as well, I think we'd all be interested. Thank you. And thank you for that, Madeline. Are there any further questions?
Pleasure.
All right, so if there are no further questions, comments, or contributions from our side, then I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to the heads around the table for being present at today's meeting. As I indicated, the next Transport Forum meeting for this project then is scheduled for Thursday, the 6th of November from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And Harry will disseminate more information. I also note that Nikki Sasman says to Nubuntu, great work by the CoJ. Thank you. And she'd love to connect. And AZ Soko also says great work by the city. So from our side, apart from thanking all the participants who were present, we'd also like to extend an absolute, a massive hand of appreciation to Harry for having arranged all of this, for making it possible. Thank you very much, Harry. It wouldn't have been possible with all your efforts. And so I think the next, if I see you, when I see you, the beer is on me or the glass of wine. All right.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you,
Sounds
Naomi.
promising. All right. So just to conclude our program then, I'm going to pass over to Nubuntu for an official word of thanks. But from our team, Yaku for all his hard work, and Lesefo also working in the background that you weren't introduced to today. Thank you also for making today possible with your presentation. So over to you, Nubuntu. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Harry, this obviously would not have taken place without your support. So thank you so much. We truly appreciate this. And the robust discussions that was held and the input made by everyone is very, very valuable to us. So we appreciate you for having made the time to join us this Monday afternoon. Your inputs are valuable. We'll definitely take them on board, explore them a little bit more as we move forward. But I think we look forward to these types of engagements because it's outside of the core team, and there are valuable insights that come that don't necessarily come from the core team and from external stakeholders. So we always look forward to this. Thank you so much for the time. And yeah, great afternoon. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Nubuntu, and thank you so much, the team, for engaging with the Transport Forum. I really appreciate it. It's a privilege. And let's give a big hand to all the panelists who participated this afternoon. I think it was absolutely a great event. And Naomi, thank you so much for being an excellent chair. We're looking forward to being chaired by you again soonest. So thank you very much, everybody. Take care and have a good afternoon further.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.